Hello and welcome to my presentation for game design theory. This is my Miro page, and these are the three that I've decided to use. So my first one is game feel. For this, I decided to go with Gang Beasts. It's a first-person party game which puts players against each other in a last-person standing scenario. However, I think the game lacks juice for its absence of effects within its combat system, for example. So the addition of more animations, I think can help the game feel more tactile and engaging. So, for example, when a player is knocked out, there's no feedback for the player to know, and in the chaos of the game, it can be easily missed. So, an improvement to solve this would be by juicing up the game and adding more effects. You can then indicate when stuff like this happens, for example, when you get knocked out and when you knock someone else out. So, a new effect would need to be created, and as there is no existing one already, they'll need to go through the iterative design process, which will then help them figure out which effect most fits the game and most fits each scenario. So, for example, when a player gets knocked out, there'll be a blink effect on the screen, which I think makes the game feel more responsive. We then have a punch effect. So when you hit a player, it's like a mini explosion, sort of like out of a comic book. Down here, we have a screen shake. So when your player falls off the map, your screen sort of shakes and shudders, signifying that you have fallen off. And down here we have a default image of the game. So this is raw gameplay. As you can see, there's no effects on the screen, there's no animations. I think it makes the gameplay look a bit dull and not responsive and sort of lacks personality. So the redesign would be fairly simple, as the effects could just be an overlay which makes the screen dim or blink. The players don't actually interact with anything physical within the level, so there'll be no redesigns that will be necessary. I think it'll be easier to develop and implement whilst improving the game visually and making it feel more responsive. A simpler visual effect could be just a symbol above a player's head to signify that they've been knocked out. I think that would suffice, and it would use less resources for the developers. For example, here we have just like a sleep bubble above their head to show that a player is knocked out. Now we'll move on to the next one. So for my second page, I decided to go for goals and quests, and for this I picked Human Fall Flat, which is a puzzle-solving game, and I think it doesn't offer any help to players throughout its quests, which are its levels. So the redesign will help guide players through the levels when they get stuck, while still offering challenging puzzles. So the core loop of the game is to complete the different levels by completing the puzzles throughout each level to then progress. However, there isn't a support system for players that get stuck trying to complete the goal. So to solve this issue, a guidance system that activates after a specific period when a progression occurs can guide the players through their current puzzle. For more skilled players, it can be turned off, but for younger or not as skilled players, they can activate it before starting the game. So, for example, this would be the level before any help has happened. The player might not know where to go, and then this arrow will appear showing them where to go. Same here, they might not know where to go here. They may need to go up there, but they don't know how to. So this will pop up saying pull me, or this image will say drag left. So the guidance system will need to be designed and implemented into each level, and this will take the developers time. However, it will improve the player's experience moving through the linear levels, keeping them on track. This is necessary to prevent a lack of extrinsic motivation caused by players being stuck and not progressing through the game. If a player does get stuck, they might get bored and just decide to stop playing, which is obviously not what anyone wants. So a couple more examples here. It will pop up on the wall saying where you need to put this box, or here it will tell you to remove the wooden boards. Instead of physical hints as well that show the players where to go, there could be a hints tab that guides the players through via description. So it'll pop up on the screen. It'll just be a very simple description of what to do. This could be more viable because it will take up less time and will be easier to design and then implement. I have a flowchart here. So the player will start the level. Does the player progress? If they do, they don't need any hints. They carry on. But if the player doesn't progress, they will then get a hint. And then, did the hint help? If it did, they move on to the next stage of the level with no hint on the screen. However, if the hint didn't help, you'll then get a more obvious clue. So that is my second page. Now we'll move on to the final page. So I decided to go for Golf with Your Friends for my final design proposal, looking at GameFeel. It's a mini golf simulator game that fails to provide impact and responsiveness due to the lack of visual feedback. I feel like the overall game feels kind of basic and could be improved by the addition of effects relating to the player's ball. So there's no visual feedback when the player's ball collides with the wall or another player. So the first step would be to decide what actions require what effects. And then the next step will be the iterative design process. So that can take place, and you can trial these new designs and figure out which one adds the most juice. Then finally, the implementation would occur. One key redesign is the impact effect that occurs when two balls collide. This creates a sense of visual importance and increases the game's visual stimulation. For example, here, when the balls collide, there's a mini sort of explosion. It adds more sort of weight and more visual stimulation, as I was saying. And here we have when the ball goes into the hole, there's another explosion. And then down here, when the ball hits the wall, there's an impact, again, quite similar to when the ball hits another ball. So this just adds more feel to the ball as it interacts with the environment more. I added a splash effect to when the ball goes in water. Usually the ball just goes under, there's no effect. So this adds sort of more realism to the mechanics and adds more visuals to the game. And down here we have when the ball falls from a large height and it hits the ground, it creates an earthquake, a screen shake. It gives the ball more impact as it causes the screen to shake. And then the redesign is viable and realistic due to the nature of the elements. They're small, quick effects, don't take up too many resources. So the impact on the developers wouldn't be overwhelming. And then finally, an alternative may not to add any effects at all, keep the game more realistic since it is based off a real sport. Some players may prefer this. They may not want all these visuals. They just want a more plain, simple looking game. So that is my presentation. Thank you for watching.